My name is Suzan Shahrestani. I'm a PhD student here at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory. I research jellyfish in the Chesapeake Bay, where they are and what they're doing. So I actually grew up in New York, right on the Hudson River, and I've always been fascinated with estuaries. They're just a wonderful place, very diverse. You see a lot of different birds, a lot of different organisms. And I think that the Chesapeake Bay, being the nation's largest estuary, really fascinated me early on. So I'm really happy to be here, to actually be right on the water. Jellyfish eat copepods, they eat fish eggs, they eat fish larvae. So they're really important to the ecosystem because we want to know how much they're eating. They represent economic importance and ecological importance. So if we know how much a jellyfish is eating, we can kind of assess the damage they're doing. Also, people don't like to get stung. So by knowing where they are and how many of them will be where, we can kind of forecast and tell people to avoid certain areas so they won't get stung. There's a really big scarcity of jellyfish data out there because it's really difficult to sample them. When you drag nets, they kind of break apart in the nets because they're so fragile. So you can't really go out there and sample them as you would fish. I use high-tech technology to track how many jellyfish are actually in the bay. So we use things like sonar imaging, which is using sound waves instead of light waves to create high-definition images. So we can actually see in the dark and we can see in high turbidity waters, which is what's really common out there in the bay. We also use something called a zooplankton imaging system, UMCES, and it can take really fine-scale images of little things like copepods and baby jellyfish. We don't actually damage the species, but we can get a really accurate idea of how many of them are actually out there. So I'm a PhD student in Fisheries Science, and I study jellyfish, which probably doesn't make much sense. But essentially what I'm doing is trying to assess the impact jellyfish have on important food resources. So after my PhD, I would really like to continue on that track with food sustainability and making sure that we have wild fish stocks to fish for the remainder of our lives.